So if you're betting on football, or you have some particular betfair football trading strategy that you want to use, lots of people look at historical data to form an opinion on how they think the match is going to play out. However, that's critically flawed. And in fact, what you should be doing is predicting what is likely to happen. So continuing our series on predicting football matches, we're going to take you up another level in this video. I've been successfully betting, trading and investing for over 30 years. I have a lot of knowledge up here. I would like to get it out there. So if you like this video, then well, like this video. But also please share, subscribe, do all of those wonderful things to tell me that I'm on the right track. Visit the Academy as well if you want some structure behind all of your learning. Pop into our forum where you can talk to like-minded people. And why not download a free trial of BetAngel if you want to use the same software that I use every day. Thank you for listening to this unashamed plug. Now let's get on with the video. So before I can take you forward, I need to take you back a little bit. We're going to reappraise a few of the videos that I've done previously so that if you've never seen them before, you'll understand the context of what we're talking about here. But also, if you have seen them before, we will take you through those logical steps to bring you to the stage that we're at now. Now, the first video that I did in this series was looking at historical data. And it is worth looking at historical data, but purely from the perspective of being able to model it. You know, you look at data, you figure out exactly what that data is telling you, and then that gives you the basis on which you can predict. That's the way that you use historical data. It's very common, especially in betting markets, that people use historical data to try and make decisions. But you run into the gambler's fallacy, essentially, because what you're actually doing there is you're basically saying, oh, because there have been 6 reds on the roulette table, that makes the seventh, the seventh has got to be a black. Or there definitely won't be another red, or maybe, there will be a 7th red. Because so you're using data incorrectly. The best summary I've ever seen of this is that you should use data you shouldn't use data like a drunk uses a lamp post for support rather than illumination. And that's absolutely, totally nails the way that you look at historical data. Okay, a team has won 3 away, or every time they've scored in the 10th minute, it's something. That is part of a model. It is not a statistic in its own right. Correlation is not causation. I'm not going to labour on the point too much. But when you looked at the first video, what we actually did was we basically brought up a load of data from league tables and other sources. And then we actually looked at that data and said, what is it telling us? And the data came back to us and told us basically that a certain number of goals were going to be scored and whom they were going to be scored by. And then we put that into a model to predict something that was going to happen that weekend. So that is definitely the starting point of where you need to go on this journey. And if you haven't seen that video, then I suggest that you watch it. So when we move on to the other video that I did in this series, I didn't explicitly state that it was directly linked, but it sort of follows on because it's rather obvious. What it actually described was the way that football markets are all interrelated. So that video was designed to show you that correlation between all of those markets, because if you're able to predict one thing, that will automatically allow you to predict another. And I won't go into great depth because it probably requires a separate video, but quite a few years ago, can't remember the date off the top of my head, Betfair actually started offering cross-matching or virtual bets on football markets because they're all related. So you could place a bet on one market and it would replicate itself on another. If you want to hear more detail about that, leave a comment and because that will allow me to identify that you are interested in going into that level of depth, and I can do a whole video on that particular subject because you may find it interesting. I don't know. Let me know if you think that would be interesting. But the net effect of that was that bound that correlation even stronger. So if you see a strategy or somebody saying something based upon one market triggering an action in another, that's a sort of false thing to do because all of the markets are related. That was what we covered in that third video. But what we're going to do now is we're going to basically bring all of those things together to come up with a predictive model. And on this occasion, what we're going to be doing is looking a lot closer at the differences between two teams, because that's key to understanding exactly what the odds should be on individual outcomes. And because the last video and the sequence of videos that we've done have led us up to this stage about how many goals are there going to be and are there going to be goals or no goals, then the most natural progression of that is to have a look at the both to score market, because that will correlate perfectly with what we're trying to achieve, because we're going to be saying that there are going to be goals or there are not. How are they going to be distributed between those two teams, and how can you combine those into a number that you can bet or trade with? So let's have a look in more detail at that by reappraising some of the things that we've done and bringing us to that particular point. So the first place that we need to start at is with data, and inserting the caveat that I gave you earlier, you have to use the data to build something rather than just stare at it blankly. After you've watched this video and this sequence of videos, you'll understand exactly why, because you'll realize that statistics can produce something that, doesn't clearly define exactly the source or the origin of that particular stat. I haven't explained that very well at all, but basically once you go through the sequence, you will be able to apply it to different things, and you will see the gap between correlation and causation. And that's the key to having a decent model. There are many different sites out there. There are so many now, it's unreal. There's a massive choice of them, and most of them are free, which is, hey, amazing. But the site that I quite like using is Soccer Stats. I'm not affiliated with them. I'm not recommending them for any reason other than I think that the data that they have on their site is actually pretty good, and it's very useful in terms of, at a glance, browsing of data, but also for using it for the purposes in which we're going to use. And that is why I'm recommending it, simply because I think that it's good. So yeah, what we're primarily looking for here is the average number of goals that teams have scored home or away. So if we're looking at a particular fixture, we can go onto this site. We can basically say, oh, this team, the home team scored X number of goals, the away team scored Y number of goals, and therefore those are the two stats that we can use to start combining and producing ratings. So the simple formula we're going to use is actually the one that I've given you already, but I'm going to give it to you with practical purpose now so that you can start to work more effectively with it. But what we're going to do now that's different is we're trying to solve this problem of both teams to score. The formula that I used before was, are there going to be any goals, i.e. no teams are going to score, or how many goals will there be in effect? Will teams score? But we didn't ask it on an individual basis. So this is the next natural evolution in this set of videos, to be able to split those two things out and actually come up with an answer to, are both teams going to score? So yeah, let's do that. And we're going to look at data from the prior football league season in the Premier League. So we're going to use two matches as an example here. And we're going to use Southampton against Newcastle. And then we're going to use Manchester City playing Leicester. And in the way that I've ordered it, obviously you can identify who the home teams are in those particular matches. But what I want you to do initially is have a guess. Which one of these two matches do you think is forecast to have the most number of goals in it? Southampton v Newcastle or Manchester City against Leicester? Have a guess. Which one of these matches is going to contain more goals? You said, our survey said, if you're a football fan, you're into your statistics, or you follow it in any way, you probably know the scores within these matches, and you could probably guess which one of these is more likely to have more goals. But if you're going to be actively betting or trading, that's not good enough. You can't go with a gut feel, or you sort of think, well, this is probably, what does probably mean? You're going to have to stick a number on it, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to stick a number on it for you. So if we first look at Southampton v Newcastle, as you are probably aware, last year, at the point of recording this video, Southampton struggled at home. Why did they struggle at home? Well, the answer is quite simple, because if you look at the number of goals that they scored at home, they actually only scored on average 1.11 goals per game, which is remarkably small. You would typically expect sort of, 1.4, 1.5 goals on average at home. So you can see they were well underneath that. Now, if we look at the league average, you can see the league average for away team scoring was 1.2. So you can see immediately there's the problem. They obviously just were not scoring enough goals at home. But if we look at Newcastle, then Newcastle scoring away actually had an even worse average. Thought Southampton were bad at home. Have a look at Newcastle away. They only scored on average 0.95 goals. So you add those two numbers together and you're talking just over an average of 2 goals per game on this particular match. Now, the typical range that you tend to see in these sort of forecasts is sort of, between 2 to 3 and something, depending upon, there's a number of different factors that would take a different video altogether. But basically, you get a distribution of the large number of goals. I have done a video on that. And you tend to see that, so there are some events at either extreme, but most of them sort of end up roughly in the middle. The Southampton v Newcastle game is at the lower extreme on that side of things. Now, if we look at Manchester City against Leicester City, we end up on the other side of the curve effectively, because what we look at there is the average number of goals Manchester City scored at home. The average was 3. And if we look at Leicester City, then the average number of goals that they scored away was 1.68. So we add those together and you can see that there's, like it's saying, on average in those sort of games, it's going to be 4.68 goals. But of course, the thing you have to remember here is that some of these goals would have been scored against lower division, teams lower in the division. Some would have been scored against higher. So you have to account for some of that when you do this particular calculation. If you're using this sort of data, you have to sort of say, Manchester City scored a lot of goals, Liverpool scored a lot of goals. But if you put the two teams together, to a certain extent, they're going to start to cancel each other out. So you need to take account of that. But nonetheless, you can see on a broad basis here that fundamentally speaking, Man City and Leicester City is going to be a higher scoring game. And when you look at that overall, that begins to paint the first picture for you. What I suggest you do when you look at this sort of data is you actually rank them, and you basically put them in a whole ranking from matches that are much less likely to have goals to matches that are more likely to have goals, and that will define where you place your bet, or you develop a particular and put a particular trading strategy to use within the market. That gives you your sort of first look at where you think matches will be of interest, and you can start to qualify things a little bit further from there. So now that we've gathered some data, we can actually dive a little bit deeper. We can unlock some additional information from all of the data that we've gathered. We can actually convert some of it into a number. And if we look at the Southampton v Newcastle match, we can ask a simple question here. We've gathered the data. What's the chance of Southampton not scoring in the next match? We know that on average, they score 1.11 goals when they play at home. So what's the chance of them not scoring a goal in the next match? That's quite easy to work out because we have done it before. We can basically raise e to the negative power of 1.11, and that will spit out a percentage for us. The percentage that it spits out is 0.33. So this is basically saying to us there's a 33% chance, there's a 1 in 3 chance that Southampton will not score at home in the next match. Now, by default, you can do the reciprocal. You can basically say, if there's a 33% chance of them not scoring, and there's a 67% chance of them scoring. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take that 67% and combine it with the Newcastle forecast. So if we run the same equation across Newcastle, that spits out a number which is 0.38. There's a 38% chance that they won't score, which is roughly a 62% chance that they will. And then we combine those two percentages together. So if we multiply 0.67 by 0.61, that comes out with another number, which equals 0.411. So basically, if we're combining those two numbers, multiplying those two percentages together, that gives us another percentage, and that percentage is the chance that that both teams will score in the next match, because we've already calculated the chance of them not scoring, we converted that to the chance of them scoring, and then we multiplied them together. So if there's a 41.1% chance of Southampton and Newcastle scoring, we can convert that into decimal odds, and that equals odds of 2.44. Those are the sort of odds that we would expect to see on the both to score market in this particular match. Now, we're not adjusting this for any other factors, and I suggest that when you create a model, you have to look at it and adjust it for a couple of little factors. So you would also say, are these two teams close to each other in the league? or they're further away? Is there an incentive score? Stuff like that. That's how you would refine it as a professional. But what I want to do is bring you in at a level at which you can get some reasonable usefulness from it, and then you can take it forward however you wish from there. Now, if you run the same calculation on the Manchester City and Leicester match, Manchester City scored on average 3 goals within a match. So if we do the same calculation again, then what we actually come up with is the chance of Manchester City not scoring in the next match is just 5%. So that means there's a 95% chance that they will score in the next match. Can you see how useful this sort of data is? It's very interesting to take data, crunch it, put it into formula and spit out a number. Gives you a basis on which you can bet or trade in that market. If we look at Leicester City, then they were scoring 1.68 goals. We can do the same calculation again, where we raise e to the negative power of those goals. That comes out with a figure of 18.6%, which means that there's an 81% chance that they will score in the next match. So again, we can take those two numbers, 95%, multiply it by 0.81%, and that spits out another number, which turns out to be about 77%. And then we can convert that to decimal odds by doing 1 divided by the percentage. And that tells us that the both to score in this market would be 1.29. It would be quite low. Now, in reality, the scenario that we would have seen last season is both teams were near the top of the league. Both teams were fighting for Champions League places and so on. So necessarily you would probably have to change or adjust it slightly for that particular model, because to say that you think there are going to be 4.68 goals within a match is a little bit crazy. If you say every time these two teams play there will be more than 4 goals, that doesn't really make any sense. So you may want to trim those goal numbers into the bounds of a normal distribution of goals to bring it maybe towards the end of one end of the curve, but not way out and extreme and beyond all sensible projections. And by doing that and then recalculating this number, you'll see the odds on the both to score will start to bump up a little bit to reflect that adjustment. So when you do these sort of calculations, it always makes sense to sanity check it and also to look at stuff that you've seen before and see roughly where it sits within that particular framework. But yeah, what we've basically done there is been able to work out the chance of either team scoring and both of them scoring. And it's a relatively simple process to go through. So hopefully what you've learnt in this video is how to look at data. And, data is important, but it's not the be all and end it all, because data shows you what did happen, but it doesn't tell you what's going to happen, and it won't allow you to pin a number on it, or not a reliable number, as you have probably seen. But if you have some sort of fundamental structure to what you're doing, the way that you're analysing it, the way that you're constructing an output within that market, and you're sanity checking it, then that will give you a good indication as to where things are likely to be. Over time, you can begin to refine that. I refine my model endlessly and try and take account of new things that I've seen or stuff that I think can adjust it. And also, if a player isn't playing or is playing, or there's other news, that will affect the model as well. So you have to start sort of adjusting for that. But, I've given you a basic framework here, and you can use that, for example, and it's best used over a large group of matches. If you take a range of sort of 10 or 20 matches, you apply all of these fundamentals to it, then you'll begin to form a ranking. And you can sort of say, well, most of the matches that have lower number of goals are up here, and therefore I'm going to do a strategy in there. And most of the matches that are likely to have lots of goals are down here, and therefore I'll change my strategy for that. And these ones in the middle, Freudian slip, the muddle in the middle, you're not so sure about. So maybe best to avoid those. But that's how you would sort of use this data and these sort of calculations. Anyhow, there is more that I can talk about. So if you want me to talk about these sort of things more and expand this topic and do all sorts of clever things, we can head in that direction. Just give me a like, comment, give me some feedback, and I can produce some more videos along this line. Anyhow, I hope that this video has been useful for you.